wrap and reassemble. Come to think of it, this being one step was a little bit of an oversight. It seems like this is now the perfect recipe for what comes next. But before I get too much further, I gotta wait for materials. I could probably reuse some of the scraps on the smaller portions of the car, but the majority of the front, the rear, and of course the roof of the car are gonna need more material. And as far as the red panels, which I want to redo, well, it kinda makes sense to wait until the rest of the green panels are finished before sanding those. I guess all I really have to wait for then is the material, so hopefully they don't test my patience too much. Good morning to you too, FedEx. Next time, how about just an email? Well, it's the right color for sure, but the one thing I'm noticing that has me a little on edge is it's half the amount I had before. My want for everything to be perfect might need to be tempered a little bit. I just won't have enough material to redo the whole thing again, so past a point, I'll need to figure out what good enough is. For some reason, having a limited amount of material started to really stress me out. Not like it really takes much to stress me out, but I'm still struggling mentally to figure out what I want from this wrap. It all started with the rust repair on the fenders, and the whole wrap itself was an afterthought. But now it's really starting to look so good that little things are bothering me. And I know perfection in this car isn't reality. It's never gonna be that way. But it's a little tough putting a lot of effort in for what, at the moment, appears to be mediocre. This is a pretty big panel, and it was the final piece of PPF from my original roll. After this, it's either I'm using scraps, or I'm working into my limited supply. No pressure. Thankfully, the rear of the car actually turned out pretty solid. There are definitely imperfections from my bodywork, but in all honesty, it looks leagues better than I really thought it would, so I should probably be pretty happy. The next thing I wanted to work on was the rear bumper, and this is that weird textured finish that both of the rocker panels and the front of the car has. The texture itself has pros and cons. The biggest issue is that it's very hard to get the material to actually want to stick to it. I found I had to use a lot more heat than normal, as well as my hand to press out the air, as opposed to the squeegee like a flat surface. The good news is any imperfections are pretty impossible to see because of the texture itself. A lot of what keeps this material stuck to the car is it having a vacuum effect. Well, with the textured material, it's hard to ensure there's actually no air inside. But at the very worst, I could always look into something like an M-Tech kit. That way it's flat to begin with. This is definitely worth a try as is, though. Well, it looks like the rocker panels as well as the rear of the car are complete. Might as well move on to the front of the car and give it the same treatment. Too bad because the rear of the car is in the air, the front is hardly reachable. Actually, come to think of it, it might be a good time to get this car back on the ground. And I think I've finally come to terms with the fact that the first time I'll be driving the car like this won't be on summer tires. It's amazing how projects spiral. When I first brought the car into the garage, I thought it wouldn't be more than a couple weekends. Sand the rust, stop it from spreading, then sand the car and toss a wrap on it. I wish now I thought about it as simply as I did then. Back then, it was just a driver that I was trying to make better. I didn't care about perfection. I didn't even really care that the paint was peeling. Back then, the whole reason I brought it in here was to just be preemptive on the rust so I could keep driving it. The wrap was an afterthought. Yet now, for some reason, a season's passed and I still can't take my mind off it. It's been on jack stands so long I almost forgot how low this car actually is. Not slammed or anything, it's just a tiny car. Having it on the ground again should definitely make it easier to wrap the roof though. And sadly, I already know this is another part of the car which can't possibly be perfect. Since the roof, the rain tray, the rear quarter panels, and the rear bumper are all one metal piece, there's no way to physically wrap it all in one piece of PPF. It just doesn't come in that size, so I'm going to have to do it piece by piece and section by section. In other words, there's going to be creases. I just need to come up with intelligent places to actually hide them. And the first of which I could think of was at the base of the A-pillar, where it meets this little metal front that would be the rain tray on any other car. And I don't really know if this is the right place to hide this crease, but only one way to find out, I guess. Cut the material to make some sort of a fake body line, and I think that's going to have to be the same method I use on the roof. If I'm being honest, I'm quite apprehensive about the roof itself. The last large panel I did on this car was the hood, and that turned out absolutely horrible. So bad that I'm planning to redo it. But this is an original panel to the car, so I'm hoping it behaves the same way that the rest of the car has. Still, the amount of material is what has me stressed. I could really only redo this section a couple times. Maybe I've learned enough to put out one decent panel. Compared to the roof on the S4 or the TT, this was actually a fairly easy panel to do. It's extremely flat, so glossing it out is really the most important step, and the edges are normally where I would mess up next. But this car has chrome trim that surrounds most of them, so in a way, that was kind of taken care of. The only part I'm not happy with about this is that it still couldn't be done in one piece. Both the A and the C pillars are just simply too large for one piece of vinyl to cover. Just like the front of the car, there has to be a seam somewhere. So either I flip the material horizontally, giving me enough to do both the pillars in one piece, but leaving a giant crease across the entire middle of the car, or I do it like this, keeping the roof one consecutive piece and having a seam at the top of the C-pillar. Makes me wonder if I should wrap the roof black like I do on my other cars. I guess if there has to be a seam, that would at least make it intentional. It just kind of sucks that from an application standpoint, this roof is done really well. It just wasn't ever going to be perfect, no matter how well I did it. After the distraction that was the roof, I moved back to the world of scraps and specifically trying to use them to finish the front of the car. Looks like I skipped step 2 for step 3, but a little bit of catch-up never really hurt anybody. Just like the rocker panels and the rear of the car, this textured material is insanely hard to get the material to stick to. Even with the dry application, it's just so textured that it's not thrilled being here. I think it'll stick, but it might lift in parts, which is something I'm a little worried about. Does make me wonder if looking into some sort of a body kit would be good down the line. I love the way the car looks now, but that would at least fix this problem. Time for the most frustrating part, at least in my opinion, of wrapping any car, the mirrors. On something like the TT or the S4, they're one giant sphere, so doing it in multiple panels isn't really an option. This car, however, has very flat mirrors. There's rectangles, there's triangles, and each one of those has pretty sharp edges. And in the case of wrapping them, that's kind of a good thing. I'd like to do it in as few pieces as possible. However, because those body lines exist, it gives me the option to hide creases that won't really be visible to the eye. So with that in mind, I attempted both of the mirrors, and boy, did they take forever. Thankfully, at least, all the sections were small enough that the scraps were all I really used. As far as how the mirrors ended up, I'm not thrilled. Once again, I'm probably being too hard of a critic, but the closer you look, the worse they look. So it really makes me wonder if wrapping the roof black and just buying some black painted mirrors is the way to go. Holistically speaking, these are the best mirrors that I've attempted. I'm just still struggling with being happy with that for some reason. After the mirrors, I moved on to the bumpers, which were a breath of fresh air in their simplicity. Once again though, too wide for one piece of PPF. So just like before, I've got to hide some creases. Thankfully, there's body lines on the black plastic portion, which I can simply continue. Putting this bumper on is kind of making me realize that this car is pretty much wrapped. I almost didn't realize how close I was getting for a second. Maybe that has something to do with why I'm being so nitpicky. Knowing that realistically in a couple days, I'll be in the position where I should take the car out of the garage and enjoy it again. Maybe I've got this whole thing wrong. On the one hand, this whole time I feel like I've been trying to make this car perfect. But on the other hand, I completely understand that this car was never going to be perfect to begin with. So if I'm not working towards that, why am I so worried about it? Maybe that's not the motivating factor here. Maybe I'm just scared of calling this project done. There's a sort of safety I find in the words "in progress," something I don't really find in "finished." A lack of accountability, maybe. I don't really know. Still, at this point, every single panel this car has, barring a couple trim pieces, is wrapped. I could, technically speaking, call it as is and reassemble the car, but something tells me that that's not what I should do. Sure, it's way better than it was, but in my head, it's not finished. I guess the imperfections on the hood and the fender are small compared to anything the car had before, but I don't feel like I could call it done unless I fix those, or at least make them better. And even then, I don't know if I'll ever consider this car done. But maybe I don't need to. I feel like very few things in life are ever fully and completely done. You can always do more, and you can always call it as is. It's all about how you look at it. And the better something gets overall, the more a small issue starts to stand out. So maybe, rather than trying to call it finished, I should just take solace in that idea. Fix the issues in the moment that really bother me, and understand that when those are gone, there will always be some things to take its place. They just don't all need to be fixed at one time. And so long as you leave things better than they were, maybe that's enough to be happy with. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. That's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.